So, I was reflecting on something a little bit earlier, and I did a video on TikTok about it, but there is a thing called autistic shutdown. Now, meltdown, that's where you're basically, people like to use the words throwing a tantrum or a fit, which is hugely derogatory. It's a very holistic standpoint, and it is extraordinarily disregarding of the person's present state. But then there's a thing called shutdown, and that's where the neurodivergent individual wants to separate themselves from the situation as quickly as possible so that they can recoup. But what we often find, or what I've found with other neurodivergent individuals and myself, is that during a shutdown, what will happen is you begin to lose mental function. You begin to retreat. Because if we can't retreat from the situation, we retreat into ourselves. And that's often what happens with trauma victims, is they will retreat within themselves in order to protect themselves from the external situation. And just to give you a little bit of background, I joined the Marine Corps. I was the first name tag pulled because the drill instructors were decent. They spotted me a mile away. And I had my toiletry bag pulled the first day, meaning I didn't have a toothbrush. I didn't have soap. I didn't have anything except for my rucksack. And they did try to break me throughout. And it was actually a fun game of cat and mouse, in my opinion. But I've also fought escalating rounds on a broken foot, meaning a green belt broke my foot when I thought I was going to kick him right in the side. He lifted his knee quicker than I thought he could. And then the next round was against a first degree black belt. And then by the time I faced the third round, which was against a third degree black belt, I was pulling a straight Karate Kid, the crane kick and all of that. Yeah. Guy took me down too quick. Like that was not nice. I say all that to say somebody like me who survived Southside Chicago has been threatened by some decently, well, people you don't want to be threatened by. Survived -18 with no heat for 3 days. Yeah, people like me can have a shutdown too. That's a very real thing. In fact, it happened very recently. And during that time, I was just falling into myself more and more. But a lot of what causes the shutdown is the emotional inference, meaning we are emotional in that moment, and the other person has a level of emotional influence. That emotional influence determines the level of involvement that we have. So let's say it's just a random person on the street. We can brush that off. Like it's rough, but if it's a random person, we can usually brush that off and distance ourselves from the situation. If it's a group of people and you're cornered, that's when you start to fall into yourself. If it's a familial situation or a friend situation, and you can't walk away without losing something emotionally valuable, that is a challenge. Excuse me. And during a shutdown, as we fall into ourselves, our cognition, it still remains. We're still aware of the situation, or at least in my case, that was the case. We're aware of it, but on the same token, the ability to interact is diminished, meaning the responsiveness. Think about it like being in a car and going from being just a pristine NASCAR driver to becoming a regular driver, or being somebody who's been driving for 20 years and now you're driving like your first year. It's about like that. And again, this is just my personal inference and experience. But when it comes to shutdowns, the big thing to notice is, well, notice the shutdown. It's very obvious. It will be very obvious. But taking that step back, that's where consideration comes into play. That's where we listen to the person's involvement and we see, whoa, 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 this person is not acting normal. That's when you should be taking a step back. Some people don't see it that way. Some people see it as a situation where, okay, I'm going to double down. I'm going to reinforce this. I'm going to press the issue. I'm going to press my advantage. That's when trauma sets in. Now, what will happen after that encounter is any emotional value that that person had distanced, because we suddenly realize, okay, that, like, through reflection afterwards, number one, there's embarrassment. There's definite embarrassment because that situation was humiliating, not being able to defend oneself. And being defenseless is just a horrible situation to begin with. But afterwards, don't expect the relationship to remain the same. Expect a distance, because that is how we protect ourselves. And that's how we can become more withdrawn. It happens a lot with family and parents at a young age. Is you'll find a lot of autistic individuals when they grow up, they don't really look to their parents any further for any sort of guidance. Even though a lot of people will come back in their 20s and be like, hey, how did you solve this? We really don't as a collective. Now, is that to say this is the golden rule? Not at all. But it's more referring to the fact that if the parent wasn't there, or if the parent was the one pressing the advantage, the damage further, then what ends up happening is we will see a pattern. Like, it won't be an immediate pattern. It won't be one of those where the very first time is the last time. Not usually. But once we see a pattern of behavior, that's when we know to distance ourselves. So if you want to maintain the relationship with the autistic individual and you see them withdrawing into themselves or losing their ability to communicate, that is a progression towards shutting down. And that's how we defend ourselves, the same way that certain victims of certain types of trauma will shut down often and eventually get to the point of being unresponsive. When that happens with us, when we start shutting down, when you start seeing those first signs, allow us to walk away. Allow us to distance ourselves from that conversation. We will come back. We'll come back refreshed often. But give us the opportunity to walk away. That is a key component to maintaining that relationship. I hope this has been helpful, and there will be more advice coming in the future. Thank you.